Hello and welcome back again to another episode of Money and Marriage Made Simple. I'm Tina Bunn, your host. I am a financial coach who helps couples learn how to manage their money better, get out of debt, learn to budget, and learn to talk about money in a better way. So that's what this podcast is all about. Thank you so much for joining me today. Real quick, don't forget, follow the show and share with somebody who needs it if you are enjoying what you're hearing. So today I want to talk about a crisis. I remember sitting in the waiting room at CSU Emergency Vet Hospital, watching my dog Tegan be taken into the back. Her eye was bulging, her whole face was swollen, and I watched them taking her into the back to work on her and try to figure out what was going on. And I just prayed, please let them figure out what is happening to my poor dog. As I sat there in the waiting room for hours, I realized how much different this would feel if we had maxed out credit cards and no savings, living completely paycheck to paycheck like we did in the past. This experience would be completely different. I would be terrified for a completely different reason. This was the first time I truly understood what debt freedom felt like. So let's back up. Let me tell you the story of my sweet dog, Tegan. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see a picture of her right here. She is so sweet. I adore her. I noticed one evening, one of her eyes looked a little bit irritated, kind of watery, maybe a little swollen. I felt like it was almost bulging a little bit. And I was like, well, that's weird. I don't know what's going on. But the next morning I made a vet appointment, took her in, and they checked out her eye. Everything looked good. They thought, maybe it's just an eye infection. They sent me home with some eye ointment and told me, call back if something gets worse and it doesn't get better. And I said, okay, no big deal. Went home. By that evening, her eye was definitely irritated. I also noticed that when she tried to open her mouth, she would scream in pain. She's had issues with her teeth before, so I thought maybe she's got a bad tooth. Maybe she's got a tooth abscess. And so I tried to open her mouth, and she just screamed and screamed. So I took her back to the vet, told them what's going on. They kept her for the day. They tried to figure out what the heck was happening. They couldn't figure it out. Took her home, and by that evening, her eye was bulging out so far that I literally thought it might pop out of her head. It was terrifying. So the first thing the next morning, I took her back to the vet, her regular vet, and, her eye was super swollen. It was still bulging, but there was a lot more swelling around it on her face, and left her there at the vet so they could try to figure out what was happening. They could not figure it out. They were like, we aren't sure. It's getting worse. By that time, it was getting towards the end of the day, and they said, we need to refer you to a specialist. We need to refer you to the CSU Vet Emergency Hospital. So went and picked her up at the vet, took her over to the CSU hospital, and that was where I let them take her to the back, and I sat there for hours just waiting because they were super busy. So it took a very long time waiting to see what they would find, what they would say. Tegan ended up spending 2 nights at CSU. She had a CT scan on her head. She had surgery to drain an abscess that was behind her eye. It's called a retrobulbar abscess. Essentially, the abscess was growing behind her eye, and as it got bigger, it put pressure on the eye, pushing it out. What happened was every time she opened her mouth, it would put pressure, her jaw would put pressure on that abscess, which then pushed on her eye, and that's what hurt her so bad. It was so big, they had to go in from the inside of her mouth. They had to cut open her mouth to drain the abscess from inside her mouth. When you drop a dog off at CSU, they try to give you an estimate based on symptoms, what they think that you're going to need. They had a pretty good idea that she needed to have imaging, so the CT scan. They knew that she was going to spend probably at least 1 night. So they gave me an estimate of what it would cost. And I don't remember what the exact estimate was, but it was somewhere around $4,000 to $5,000. Just for the CSU stay. That doesn't include what I've already paid for at her regular vet for the couple of different times that she was there. And I just remember getting that estimate, and there was no panic. There was no hesitation. I just said, do whatever you need to do, because I didn't have to worry about the money. I knew that we had an emergency fund set aside specifically for this reason. We had no debt and we had a pile of money waiting in a savings account for an emergency just like this. So when it came time to pay for her services, there was no hesitation. The money was there because we had planned and we had worked so hard for these years to have that sitting there. This was the first time that I really experienced what that felt like. What it felt like to not have the fear, not have to scramble and figure out how I'm going to pay for this, not have to worry how much it's going to cost. All I had to worry about was, please fix my dog. Do whatever you need to do to help her and make her better. I had to worry about making those decisions of, do I leave her there? What are they going to do? I had to worry about those things. Never once did I have to worry about the money. It made me think if that had happened 3 years prior, it would have looked very different. I would have been stressed. I would have been trying to apply for care credit to see how I could potentially pay for these services on my beloved dog. It would have looked completely different. And I think now this can apply to so many things. This can apply to vet care for your pet. This can apply to medical care for your child, medical care for yourself. If you have an emergency and have to go to the hospital, you won't have to worry. How am I going to pay that $5,000 deductible? You don't have to worry. It's already there. It's a very different way of living. It feels completely different than when we were living from paycheck to paycheck, maxing out the credit cards and having so many payments to juggle. This felt very different. Now, since then, we've had all kinds of different emergencies. We had our water heater go out and we needed a new water heater. That cost, because it needed a whole bunch of work, I guess. So it costs like $5,000 for that. We needed a new septic system because our septic system failed. That cost a whole chunk of money. I don't even remember how much, but it was a lot. We've had multiple times where we have had emergencies. We've had to use our emergency fund. And then, yes, we have to replenish it, and that's a little frustrating. But the fact that it's sitting there, just waiting for us to need it, waiting for us to have an emergency and be able to have this safety net, it's incredible. And I want everybody to be able to get to that point where you can live in just peace, knowing that you've got the money to cover these expenses that come up, whether it's car repairs, whether it's medical bills, whether it's pet care, anything that comes up. You've got the money to pay for it. It's a whole different life. It's a whole different feeling going from day to day, not stressing about how you're going to get through to the next paycheck. So today I just want you to reflect. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, if you have maxed out credit cards, no savings, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do to make the change? Because you can make a change. I'm here to tell you, I've been there. It's not easy, but you can make a change. So where are you going to start? My recommendation, start with just laying it out on the table. Look at everything you have. Look at all your debt. Look at your income. Look at all of your expenses and start there. Build a budget. If that's all you do is just start there, it's the first step. It's not all of it, but it's the first step. If you are ready to commit to making real change with your finances, I would love to be the one to help you. I offer a free discovery session for everybody. So go to the link in the show notes and you can get that scheduled. I will show you what is possible for you and what financial coaching looks like for you. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Money and Marriage Made Simple. If you loved this show, I encourage you to share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Share it with somebody who needs to hear that there is another way of living. There is the possibility of peace with your money, not having that stress, not living paycheck to paycheck. It is possible. And if you love these shows, please make sure you follow because that will help get it out to more people. And I just appreciate you all so much. I will see you again next time.